everybody. I'm Mike Cornell, founder of Boston Making a Difference, here with another episode of BMAD Spotlight. Today with us, we have an exciting attorney, but more than that, she's a college counselor. She runs a business called Personal College Counseling, Inc. I'd like to welcome to the show, Honoria DaSilva-Kilgore. Honoria, welcome to BMAD Spotlight.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me.
All right, Honoria, thank you for being here today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what is an independent college consultant or advisor?
It's someone who's outside of the school system advising students in high school on how to prep for college, how to search for colleges, trying to find their best fit school. And that's what I'm doing with the students. I develop a relationship with them over time, and we look at what they want out of a school academically, socially, and also trying to fit those factors in so that it also matches up with what their family's finances can afford to do. You don't really want to overpay for college. They're expensive regardless. So you really want to maximize where that fit works for the student, not just for the student, but also for the school. The more in sync they are, and the more our student meets or exceeds their average, if you will, then the more likely they're going to get a better aid package. And that's a real key part of the strategy of what I'm doing, is not just applying willy-nilly wherever because your friends go there, or this is the only one you've heard of, or anything like that, but really starting with measurable metrics and then getting the feedback from the students and working through that, and then seeing which ones to poke and see where we generate interest, especially if they have specific interests that make them stand out a little bit, whether it's sports or some other club activity or talent they may have that raises their profile, if you will, at that particular institution. Because what we're looking to accentuate is merit aid. And that's the free money that you can get from an institution in the form of grants, scholarships, and so forth, versus financial aid, which of course we always want to maximize. But financial aid is going to be based on your FAFSA and your parents' gross income. It's a formula in a form that every single school is going to look at. So of course I can't change that. What I can do is take what makes that student more appealing and individualized to a certain location, certain institution that has everything they want, but they stand out there. And therefore you have a better chance of getting money.
So tell me, when's the best time for parents and a student to start talking with you about this process?
I like to start working with them as early as possible in their high school career, contrary to conventional wisdom, which seems to be people don't start to really think about this in depth till junior year, or gasp, even senior year. But I would like to start working with those kids as soon as they start high school, helping them figure out which classes they should be focusing on, setting the proper foundation, getting them into the standardized testing world sooner than later, so we have time to decide whether or not to retake those tests, because they are a valuable tool that the student can use to their advantage. And if you'd wait to do this till very late in high school, you don't get the advantage of using those numbers to your best benefit. So I would like to start working with freshmen or sophomores or rising juniors, but I will not work with a senior beyond October, because at that point, I don't think I can bring added value, significant added value at that point in time. So the earlier, the better, for sure.
That's great. So I'm sure there's other people out there doing the similar types of counseling, and what makes Honoria the person to come talk to?
Well, first I let the kids call me Nod because nobody can say my name right because it's an Honoria, but it's okay. But what I'm doing that I think is a bit different than some of the other folks out there is this is not about getting kids into group sessions and hammering them on test taking practice and things of that nature that some places do. I expect them to work on their own and do their practice tests and take them when I tell them to, which is going to be on a much different time frame than their high school counselors are going to tell them. I'm not going to put them in any other groups with other kids, giving them lectures or anything of that nature. This is a very one-on-one collaborative approach that I want their input on all of the subjective things we're looking at. I focus on metrics, measurements, things that make sense on the surface, but then I need their input on what is it about this school that you like, don't like, or is it just a vibe looking at it right away? You don't like it, that's fine, out it goes. And then we start to really extract where they should put their time and effort into visiting and going for the admissions interviews, talking to the right people on campus, maybe doing an overnight, depends what they're interested in, what the school offers, obviously, for those things. So they really are getting a much more concentrated exposure to schools that they're seriously interested in that can mutually benefit them.
Great. So how did you get involved in this? You're an attorney, but now you're doing college counseling. Tell us a little bit about how you got started doing this.
Two things kind of led me down this path. One, I love it. I love working with this age group. I enjoy the teenagers because I'm not a parent, or their parent, I should say. They can have a different conversation with me than their parents. So that's kind of fun. But one of the things I still do in my law practice focuses a lot on bankruptcy representation and estate planning. And one recurrent theme that keeps coming up is that poor college planning has caused people to go into massive amounts of debt, and student loans are not dischargeable in bankruptcy. So that's something they're stuck with forever, but it impacts what else you can do. If you're graduating with the 6 figures in undergrad student loans, you can't take the chance on that job because it's further away and you can't pay rent, or you can't afford to buy a car to get there, or do other things that are so important, and you're stuck in mom and dad's basement for too long. Or mom and dad have overreached, overborrowed, refinanced the house to the max, and now they're in a pinch and they're getting ready to retire, and we're looking at different numbers. And I'm like, why is this going on? And it always comes back to, I didn't understand the process. I didn't know I had other options. I really didn't understand what this kind of debt structure meant. And that's fixable. That's very fixable if you plan for it. But it was such a commonality that just kept happening. But on the flip side of that, when my son went through the process and we were looking at schools, and he was in a sport that was a little out of the norm. He was a fencer. So we weren't involved in a school sport, but very much involved in the fencing world through the club arena, I should say. So we were traveling all over the US. So he appreciates it in the long run, but while we were traveling, if there was a school within 30 minutes of wherever that tournament was, guess what? We were there. We were walking around, we were getting our tours, we were meeting with people, and we did this all over the place. I think I've seen personally now, 41 schools in 11 different states. He probably saw more because sometimes he would go with other people. But what that does is you get the vibe right away whenever you go on a campus. And that's something I cannot quantify for the student. You want to identify where you think you're interested, but then you got to get there. And by doing that, you realize how different they are. And online, it's so hard. Everybody's got pretty pictures. They all look good, but you need to see what it feels like. And not to sound like hippy dippy about it, but it's such a palpable factor. So we did that. And so by the time he applied, we had filtered so much because he really did know the difference between a big school, a little school, an urban school, a suburban school, an urban school with a campus, an urban school without a campus, a suburban school that has no campus, or a rural school that's huge and feels like its own city. It's all so different. And by doing that early and getting him out there and with a specific focus that he had, he was able to picked schools that were really very keyed into what he wanted, and also got recruited to where he eventually ended up going. And it was great. He's a senior now and he's doing really well. And even though he didn't stick with fencing for all 4 years, it doesn't matter. It put him on the right track. It put him in an environment where he got exposed to other things that he got really excited about and pursued. And that's what you want them to do, is to grow into whoever they're supposed to be.
That's great. The fencing makes me think of the Geico commercial where the couple has the problem with the neighbor's fencing.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell me, everyone's dealing with this pandemic, and how has that changed, your landscape and the landscape for the students and families looking at going to college at this point?
For me specifically, because I'm dealing with a young population, many of these students, they're not even driving till senior year. So more often than not, I'm still doing Zoom meetings, and that was pre-pandemic. It's going to continue post-pandemic because that's just a format that is convenient to the student and is flexible around their schedule. So for me, that hasn't been a great impact. Where it has impacted the students, though, and the parents, is really putting a kink in being able to get out there. Schools have limited their in-person tours, if at all, or right now, there's still many states where, yeah, you can come, but you have to quarantine for the 10 or 14 days. Well, that's just not practical right now. So we're stuck with, if it's further afar and you can't get there in person, with having to do those virtual tours a little bit, and maybe putting something on the back burner longer than I would care to initially, but it is what it is. However, I don't want and encourage people to just start doing virtual tours all over the place. That's still very time consuming. Step it back a bit. We still start with the metrics. We still start with the schools that we're very zeroed in and focused on for all of the right reasons. And then we take it to the subjective input and then take it to the next step. So right now I have a student who's going to go check out a school in New York and further out in Western Mass. But we also want them to go look at some schools in New Hampshire, Vermont, and Connecticut, but they have the quarantine rules in place or not allowing visitors out of state at all. So those have to wait a little bit. They've seen them online, so they're still in the mix, but we can't physically get there right now.
Okay, so before we wrap up, do you have any 1, 2, 3 tips you can give people that are, getting ready to, go to college, and, things that they can do now, to get themselves prepared?
I think they all should already start trying to take those SATs. That's been a real big problem for the last graduating class because they kept getting canceled. But they're still so important. It's a great tool and a piece of knowledge to have. And you can take them again. Don't wait till the last minute for that. That's so important to just kind of get out of the way and get it under your belt and kind of see where you're at. Aside from that, do really well in school as best as you can. Take classes you're interested in. Pursue things that you're interested in. It makes you who you are. Doesn't matter what it is to me. It's all that matters is that it's important to the person participating in it, whatever that is. So I think that's all important. But from the parents' perspective, Start your financial planning as early as possible. 529 plans are fantastic. I would put money in that as soon as the kid is born if you can, and add to it. But also for a reality check, go do a FAFSA for fun. Don't submit it, just do it.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun. It's not that bad, but what it will do, it's going to give you that magical EFC number, expected family contribution, and what you think you can pay for college and what they think you should be paying for college is usually not in the same universe. So you want to know what to expect, and that's generally been a big wake-up call to a lot of parents. Like, what? I'm supposed to come up with that? Well, that's why you need me to bridge the gap between that number and what the school expects you to pay.
And that leads us to the last question, which is, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, Honoria, I know I'm blowing that all over the but I'm doing my best. But if you could let the audience know, how they can get in touch with you.
Best way to get in touch with me, I think, initially is just send me an email at nod@personalcollegecounseling.com. Tell me when's a good time to get back to you, and I will. Whether you prefer a phone call or to set up a Zoom meeting or come in person, whatever you want. But that way I get it all the time. It goes to me wherever I may be. So it's definitely the quickest and easiest way to get a hold of me right away.
Okay, so I'm going to say Nod. Thank you, Nod. That's a lot easier.
Yes, NOD. It's pretty simple.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Nod. You have important information and help for people navigating, which is one of the largest expenses of your life, is going to college. So
absolutely,
you can get is really welcome. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today. I'm sure anyone with college age kids or high school age kids that are getting ready for college would love to talk to you. So to my audience, thanks for being here on another episode of BMAD Spotlight. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks, Nod.
Thanks for having me.